Morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah. Very good. Welcome, everyone. Happy to have everyone here today. I recognize a lot of the names on the list, and a lot of you have been on the other two sessions we've held already in this 5-part series through a collaboration between the Department of Education and the Next Gen Sector Partnership team. Just a quick background about who I am and what I do for those who are new on the call. I was hired by the state of Iowa through the Iowa Department of Education almost 3 years ago, about 2.5 years ago, to really help with sector partnerships across the state, either help plan for them or launch them or support the ones that are already in existence. So I've brought in the Next Gen team to kind of help with this model that they have that has been successful in a lot of states across the U.S. So we promote many of the things that they promote through their model. We actually leverage them in a number of other ways in our own training resources. But I thought it'd be great to have them hear from them directly, not from Joe Collins from the Department of Education, and then also to hear from other states. I know is a question I get a lot. What are other states doing? So that's one of the primary directives of these webinars, to try to help better understand what's being done in other states and how can we maybe learn from those best practices and those strategies to bring them back to Iowa. So I'm happy to talk with anybody after these webinars. Give me a call, shoot me an email. We also have a ton of information directly on our website that I know is going to pop up on a screen coming up here, but at sectorpartnerships.educateiowa.gov. That's also in the next steps. I'll talk a little bit more about some things that are coming up to help support your efforts across the state. One other quick mention before we dive in is that I know many of you are aware of the Future Ready Iowa initiative. It's a goal for the state of Iowa to have 70% of our workforce have education or training above high school by the year 2025. So we're well on our way across that. And this is definitely in support of that initiative. Sector partnerships and a community collaboration to try to get to that goal is necessary. And like I mentioned, there are already quite a few sector partnerships in operation around the state. There's actually around 50 to 60, kind of depending on how you classify them. There is a map on our website in case you want to see where they are, because there might be some in your backyard or near you that you could just join onto. Or I'm definitely happy to help set up new initiatives. I saw that was in the chat box. At least one person said they're looking to set them up. And then in terms of the Future Ready Iowa initiative, they also have some employer summits that are now open for registration. So check out their site at futurereadyowa.gov to sign up for some of those employer summits to continue that conversation. But like I said, I've got some other things I want to talk about as the next steps and some recommendations at the end of the webinar here. But I think I'll turn it back over to Emily. I could talk about this stuff for hours and hours. So I've got a couple of other exciting announcements to make near the end of the webinar as well. So thank you, Emily. Looking forward to hearing what you have to discuss.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. And we'll make sure that we leave a good amount of time at the end for discussion and for these updates, Joe, and questions that folks might have from you. We're also really eager to hear from you and hear from all of you as we kick things off today. So please do be thinking about what's standing out from what you've learned so far about Next Gen Sector Partnerships, and also what questions you have. So it's really great to see so many familiar names today, and a few faces on the videos. But my name is Emily Lesh, for those that I have not met before here in this virtual platform. And I work as a part of the Next Gen Sector Partnership team. Prior to working with the Next Gen team and joining them about 3 years ago, I worked with the Colorado Workforce Development Council, where I played a role of helping to support Next Gen Sector Partnerships across the state, and also develop some state policy and practices at the state level to create ongoing support for Next Gen Partnerships across the state. I also am joined by Lynn Vossler, who I am so pleased to have with us today, who I know. And Lynn, I would love for you to introduce yourself now.
Sure. So again, Lynn Vossler. My position is Director of Workforce Solutions for Front Range Community College in Colorado. We have about 30,000 students and 4 different campus sites. And I've helped to convene the Northern Colorado Healthcare Sector Partnership and the NOCO Manufacturing Sector Partnership and the Boulder Broomfield IT Partnership, and am helping with several partnerships in Wyoming at the time. So our partnerships in Northern Colorado, manufacturing and healthcare, have been going about 6 years. Both are going very strong, and so we've had ups and downs and learned a lot of lessons along the way.
Great, thanks, Lynn, and thanks for sharing them. So for all of you joining us today, I hope you will use the opportunity today to really ask Lynn about some of those lessons and bumps and strong points along the way that she's experienced firsthand. So today, what we really hope that you'll all walk away with are insights from one another. So as I've said, we're going to kick it off with some real sharing here. Some additional clarity around how to organize and support an effective sector partnership, and how a refresh meeting or a launch meeting can really set you up for long-term success for having a business-driven partnership. Also, and we also hope that you'll walk away with an understanding of what it takes to really have business leaders step up and lead these partnerships, moving away from, it's difficult to get businesses involved and they're not stepping up. And then finally, how to really organize an action plan and the work of a next-gen sector partnership. So thank you all for being here. What we'd love to do first in order to meet those objectives is to really take some time around introductions and discussion. With 25 of us on the line, I actually would love to just keep us all here in the room together, in one room, and not break into the small groups this morning. And after we have some time discussing what we've learned so far, how it matches up to what you're already seeing and partnerships you have going on, we'll move into some further conversation and instruction around the launch meeting, and also tools for maintaining momentum after the launch meeting. So to kick it off here, I would love to just hear from those across the state and those that are on the line here, and many of you have introduced yourselves on the chat function. So if you have not, please do introduce yourself there. But really would love to hear in what you've learned so far about next-gen sector partnerships. Would love to hear what aligns with what you're already doing and what you've seen work well in your regional industry-led partnerships, and also what is different. So what's matching up from what you've learned and what's different? So with that, I'd love to turn it over and have folks begin just introducing yourselves and maybe sharing some of what you've seen that matches up and doesn't. So is there a brave person that would like to be the first to introduce themselves here in the big group? Well, I'm wondering, I have, and this may require you, let's see, I'm just looking at if folks are muted, so we can all unmute ourselves. It looks like there are some, so I'm just gonna unmute everyone now. And if you are in a place where you have some background noise, please do just remute yourselves. But you all are unmuted now.
This is Rob Denson from Des Moines Area Community College. I'm just here to learn, so.
Excellent. Great. So Rob, tell me about what experience you have with sector partnerships.
Well, mainly we do whatever Joe tells us to do. No, I know we've got several DMAC people on the board or on the call who have more specific information, but clearly this is the direction we're all heading in order to give students from K-12 on a better pathway into these great jobs. And this has become even more important with the Future Ready Iowa Last Dollar scholarships that are rolling out this year. because now anybody can get into 50 very, very good, high-paying jobs with 2 years or less of education and have the state cover any cost of tuition and mandatory fees and before students have to take out loans. So, I mean, we're in a very good position, but the issue that I see is parents and students don't understand the opportunity. They're inundated with messages from all these colleges and universities. Counselors in the K-12 do not have time. They've got the expertise, but they don't really have the time to spend with students to help them do good career exploration with them and their parents. So the easier we can make this.
One question.
Oh, Rob, are you still there?
Yes.
Robert, okay, great. Great. I think I missed a little bit of what you're saying there at the end, but absolutely, you really articulate well the need to engage with industry. And so by engaging with industry, so that you as a college system have your finger on the pulse of what industry needs, what careers are out there, but then also to really be able to cull and bring forward really practical information for college career counselors, for others that are working with students every day, to really know what opportunities are out there to get individuals onto clear paths forward.
Well, yeah, and you know, every one of our programs has an advisory committee of the businesses that hire students out of those programs. So I mean, you know, we're pretty well connected, but I think we're just kind of refining all this to make it make more sense.
Exactly. Yeah, I love the word refining and continuing. It's really continuing to evolve what that industry engagement looks like and how you can best get the right information, and also getting businesses to really step up and help tackle this big issue.
Yeah, Amy Steenhook, I think you and Silas are on the phone. Amy, can you add any more to what I've said?
Yeah, I've just been, this is Amy. I'm the intermediary here at DMAC. And I guess just to kind of piggyback off of what Rob said, I know we do have advisory boards, but last week, I guess the thing that kind of stuck out to me was, I can't remember the gentleman's name that you had from business and industry, but he was saying how important it is to have a little bit different approach. You know, that there is a difference between an advisory board and a sector partnership, and that the push and the pull, and how it's important to have the businesses feel like they are leading the discussion and that they're owning it, instead of checking a box to attend an advisory board meeting. And sometimes I wonder if that's kind of, you know, that a lot of community colleges, or, you know, we all might have advisory boards, but can we refine the process to get more to that sector partnership where the businesses really feel ownership of it? So that was something that stuck out to me. And I haven't been involved in I know we facilitate the IT sector partnership, and Silas can speak to that. I haven't been involved in that, but I would be curious how we can get more of those going, that we're the convener of those at DMAC.
Excellent.
Sorry, Emily. This is Silas Hanneman from DMAC, and I'm, I guess, serve a member role for our sector partnership that we call the IT partnership for the Des Moines area. And as far as things that have worked really well, our convener, who we hired as a consultant, so he's more on the business side than he would be on the DMAC side at all, which has helped quite a bit to engage our business partners, because it's not necessarily someone from DMAC trying to get the businesses to sign on a dotted line or agree to anything necessarily. He's more of one of them. So they certainly, the business partners, that is, feel like they have a voice that's definitely heard, because they're being led and their groups are facilitated by someone who's not necessarily a full-time DMAC employee. So it's someone who's done a really good job at working both sides, helping to bring the DMAC people when appropriate together, but then also bringing all the appropriate business leaders together at the same time.
I know there's another example. I'm going to kind of put her on the spot here, but another example where a consultant was hired from the industry to come in and really refresh and reboot a manufacturing sector partnership is Christy Heisinger, and I think I saw her on here. But she's had great success over the last year, really adopting this model of being employer-led. So I don't know if she would want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting my turn here. So, yeah, we've done something a little different over here where the sector members have paid a membership in order to pay me a salary. I'm on a part-time basis to be the facilitator for this group. And so we've done a really good job with recruiting and stuff. We just got our 25th member yesterday. So we got a nice group of employers, and they are all wanting the same type of thing, and we're all wanting to head the same direction. The concern that I'm trying to work through now is when I go to ask for people to be on like a committee or something like that, I get no hands raised. So when I'm hearing that it needs to be employer-led, we're not quite there yet, but yet with me in my position, maybe they're thinking I am the leader. So it's a little bit unique situation that we'll need to work through. So I'm very interested to see what you have to say today.
Great, Christy. Well, and what I'm hearing there, I think, is like there's a bit of a paradox here in the sense that the business leaders have stepped up and they're members.
Yes.
Paying dues, and so it sounds like you might be sensing there's a bit of well, you're in charge of this, Christy. So I might not need to come to this committee because you've got it handled. Is that kind of the dynamic that you're?
A little bit, and the reason they started this position, because they've been trying to launch or relaunch this sector group for like a decade here, and they just weren't getting it off the ground. And the main reason is they just weren't able to bring it to the top of their priority list with their businesses that they have to run. So that's why they decided to go this direction. So I get where they're coming from, but what I'm hearing from you is in order for this to have the most success, it really needs to be led by them. So we need to find a way to work through that side of things.
Great, Christy. Well, I hope some of what we'll talk about later will provide some practical ideas for you to help build that industry interest. Oh, excuse me. And I also just want to go back to Mandy. I think, was that your name, Mandy? Did I get that right? Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. From DMAC. I loved how you described this aha around the push and pull and the difference between advisory councils and having a coordinated way to work with partners and other partners across your region to put businesses in the driver's seat. And also just these distinctions with the advisory councils. Lynn, I'm wondering if through this conversation so far, if there are things that really hit home with you or resonate with you of like, oh, I've been through this and this is how we're working through things.
Yeah. Yeah, Christy, I have had that exact same experience with asking a group of people, will someone please take this piece over, or will someone step up to the plate here? And in my experience, it's much more effective if you can do this to talk with folks before and after the meeting and ask them specifically one at a time to take something on. People start to build relationships personally and you will see their accountability come through personally. But I do know that when, it tends to happen when you have a big group and somebody has to raise their hand to volunteer for things, you get crickets. So that's my experience, that really personally asking folks, and you know, the worst they can say is no, but many times they're just sort of waiting. And in all my work with volunteers, I've found personal asks really, really go a long way.
Thanks. That's good advice. Because like when I do ask them to open up their doors for a student tour or something like that, they are more than willing.
Right.
But
right.
Okay, that's good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, you see those leaders come to the forefront as you work through a committee and start working together, and then going to them individually and just asking them to take on something. I think seems to work.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
You know, another, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that was Amy from DMAC that had mentioned the push and the pull, but I'm happy you said Mandy, because I was going to call her out also. But she's the employer chair of a manufacturing sector partnership in the eastern side of our state, and I know she's done a lot of work to really reboot that group as well. So I was wondering if she could maybe give a couple quick thoughts.
Absolutely, Joe. So this is Mandy Parchert. I work for H&I Corporation. We're an office furniture manufacturer out of Muscatine, Iowa. And then I chair the Eastern Iowa, Western Illinois Manufacturing-Based Sector Board. I've been involved just about 2 years now. The Sector Board has been around for several years, but it's gone through different phases of maturity. I'd say at this point we have over 200 people on our distribution list. Identifying them and keeping them engaged has been the challenge. And so we have a solid group of about 30 that meet quarterly or are very responsive via email and initiatives that we're working towards. So these past couple of years, we've really tried to shift the momentum from identification of our regional issues to action to improve our regional issues, specifically around workforce. And I'm happy to say we've definitely had some momentum, and that's definitely helped with the engagement of other employers, is seeing the action. The next step is just how to keep it going. So, and really identifying what is our scope as a board. Are we an event planner? What level of support do we provide to other regional events? How do we keep that momentum of engagement and getting other employers to continually participate? I'd say that's a similar concern and challenge that I face, and I would agree. I've been more, I would call it voluntold, right? I'm almost telling people and as I'm asking them what to do and where to help, because I know them personally and I know their strengths and I know where they can contribute. But we too, they rarely will raise their hand to say, I got this covered. I need to ask them to have it covered. Was there anything else you wanted me to touch on, Joe?
No, that was great. And Mandy actually sits on my statewide sector partnership leadership council to help me at the statewide view with some of our policies and our direction. So she's awesome to have.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing, Mandy. And I love how you described essentially the ebbs and flows of building these partnerships, because that is really what I find in partnerships across the country. There are ebbs and flows, and the key is, as you said, getting to action and really maintaining that momentum.
Mm-hmm.
How about others across the state? What ahas have you had that relate to what your partnerships are up to, or what's different that you've learned?
Good morning, Emily. This is Judy Steffel, and I'm with Kirkwood. And I was able to join the first webinar. However, I did not get to access the second webinar quite yet. But there was something that you had mentioned in that first webinar that really is of interest to me specifically. And you talked about building a regional sector support team. Mm. And in our area, when we first started sector partnerships well over 7 years ago, the players that might potentially be a part of like a regional sector support team, we're all in different spaces, and I think we've evolved over time. Where now I think we're better positioned to be able to kind of reevaluate what that might look like, so that we get all of those players working in concert. And I'm thinking about that in terms of a kind of like the larger picture view. So I'm not sure if that was something that was addressed in the second webinar, but I'm really interested in digging in deeper and learning more about that, because I think that's a space of growth for our area to continue to work in.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Judy. And we did, for those that weren't able to join last week, we did get into some depth around the role of the regional sector support team and how to form them. But it's something certainly that is a key foundation to building these types of partnerships. In the end, they are really core to reducing the number of asks that business leaders have, but also on the sector support team, the ability for you all as partners to work together to really tackle the issues in a comprehensive way, in a holistic way that business leaders are facing from the industry.
Great. Then that tells me I need to circle back around to that second webinar, because I think that'll be really helpful for us.
Great. And we can also feel free to reach out, and we'll also touch on it throughout today and also future webinars.
Yeah, Emily, this is Lynn, and I'm happy if anybody wants to reach out to me, I can share. We have a couple different regional teams, and you know, the key is getting all three of those stools, the education, workforce, and economic development folks in the room. And we meet regularly. We have in the Boulder area, it's called our Boulder Business Response Team, and we serve as that regional support group. So you've got everybody in the room too. It does work really well when you have an issue that your employers want to tackle. For example, apprenticeships. We've sat down and said, how can we make this happen? And each person comes to the table with solutions, and we kind of can work through that and then take it back to the employers and be able to help them.
Joe, maybe you or somebody can answer this. You know, how is this all interacting with the regional planning partnerships?
Yeah, so it's definitely a goal that sector partnerships play into that regional planning partnership model, because I know there's crossover between their work. So I know some groups, and I don't know if Kirkwood had integrated into their RPPs, but I know some groups up in the northeast area of our state have, and they have an org chart, for a better word, of how they interact with one another, and making a concerted effort to try to figure out. We're asking our employers to be on all these boards and meetings and so forth. How do we make sure that we're being more efficient and effective with their time? And again, maybe the RPP has different goals or a separate subset of goals, but there is definitely crossover with what the other employers within that industry, within that region are trying to accomplish. So it's a recommendation we have and we try to promote. And like I said, I know some groups have had success in combining those efforts. So I don't know if anybody on the webinar today would want to tackle that or maybe discuss a little bit of what they've done in that regard.
Not hearing any right now. Let's love to just spend, or was someone else going to jump in?
I was just going to say that I just in April met our RPP regional coordinator, and she and it dawned on us that, hey, we're doing the same thing, talking to the same people. So we're actually trying to work on a conference of sorts for later this fall, of bringing those people together, because she has a biannual meeting she needs to have with them. and it's the same conversation. So we've started conversations, not exactly sure how we're going to proceed yet, but that relationship has been recognized.
Yeah, I think there's some opportunities there. And then, we've got this whole work-based learning going on, and we're actually hiring a new director of work-based learning, a new position, because I think it's bringing those employers in, and hopefully even and getting more juniors and seniors in high school part-time work experience paid while they're finishing their last 2 years. We got the Vermeer program and another around the state. So, it all kind of overlaps at some level.
Yeah, and I know some groups have had success, such as the Eastern Iowa group, the Kirkwood group. They'll do things where they call super sector meetings, where they bring sector partnership teams from every industry together to talk about collectively what are we doing and where's some crossover with our goals so that we're more efficient with our resources. And that's where you might have a conversation about some of the broader level stuff and what do we do as a larger group or as a regional approach to try to be smarter about some of these goals and actually taking action on some of these bigger ticket items.
Well, I love how it sounds like what's happening across Iowa is that there are many big initiatives, and that's true in every state across the country, and initiatives, grants that are coming down from the federal government, from the state, other pots of funding and private foundations, and so things like Future Ready Iowa, the regional planning partnerships, WIOA, there's a strong call to get out there and work with businesses. And so I love how you're describing that these efforts are being pulled together in different places. And that's what sector partnerships and next gen sector partnerships really specifically do, is provide a vehicle for that coordination and alignment across public partners and a variety of initiatives. And so ultimately, regional teams, regional support teams that are able to braid and blend and mix and mesh a variety of programs and resources in order to meet businesses where they are, but also to further empower business leaders to step up and lead the charge forward, are those where we see great success across the country. And things like just work-based learning and bringing those employers in. Lynn, I'm wondering if you want to speak quickly to how you have seen sector partnerships and next-gen sector partnerships really serve as that vehicle for coordination, as we know there are constantly new initiatives that are being thrown at you from a variety of angles. And how have sector partners been a vehicle for grounding you as a partner team and businesses' needs?
Yeah, I think about the NOCO manufacturing partnership, and that they have a talent committee that's focused on growing the pipeline. And that committee meets every month, and there are workforce partners that sit on that committee. And as rather than, taking up all the sector partnership time to talk about the newest, greatest program that's come down through DOL or through workforce, they've started to learn to kind of hold those programs, put them together, and then bring them out when the opportunity arises, when those employers are looking for ways to bring more folks on their facility or to get more interactive with the schools. They are able to say, oh, and we have this apprenticeship program. Yes, we have this internship program, and we can help with that. So they have dovetailed very nicely. I think the secret is to go, to look at what those employers' goals are, and then look back at what are the programs that can fit those goals instead of the other way around.
Thanks, Lynn. And I'm wondering if there are others on the line, just before we move forward here, that have not introduced themselves or shared an aha or what else they're eager to learn about. Well, this conversation has certainly given me some ideas, and also some important themes have risen to the top around regional support teams, coordinating across a variety of initiatives that we'll hit on and will continue to hit on throughout the webinar series. So thank you all for this active conversation, and do please feel free to chime in throughout the rest of the conversation today and what we'll talk about. You can also use the chat box at any time. I know sometimes you might not be in the right spot to speak up on the webinar. So last week, what we'd like to spend the next half an hour, 45 minutes on here is really digging into what a refresh meeting might look like, or a launch meeting of a sector partnership, knowing that many of you and a majority of you have existing partnerships that you're grappling with. But in order to do that, I'll just quickly hit on some of the topics we covered last week, and move us into the launch meeting, and then importantly, moving into action. And for partnerships that have been at this for some time, as Christy talked about, or Mandy, I believe it was, there are ebbs and flows throughout partnerships. And so some of the principles of, although we're calling the third step the launch step, the principles of the launch and the refresh are really important to come back to, and to refresh your partnership no matter where you are. And so the foundation is important. So last week we spoke about the building the regional sector support team as a really key foundation to building out next-gen sector partnerships. And as the discussion that we just had really illustrates, it's important to have a variety of partners from across workforce development, education, economic development, other community-based organizations committed to creating a joint and coordinated approach to working with businesses in order to get to the place, as Lynn described, to be able to leverage and coordinate resources that you have and programs that you have that meet the needs of business leaders. And so that first step around building a regional sector support team really focuses on providing that foundation. So as you're working to build that sector support team, we'll continually come back to it. And it is a piece of building out next-gen sector partnerships that takes very continual development and attention. And so Lynn provided the example from Boulder and how they are coordinating resources in an ongoing way. It's likely that your regional sector support team will evolve and change as the businesses identify their needs, and you need to be responsive. And so these regional sector support teams, essentially, they're about being responsive. It requires you to be creative in how you all are working together as partners. I say all of this knowing that collaboration and partnership, they often say, is an unnatural act. And so this can be one of the hardest parts of supporting these ongoing partnerships is that regional sector support team and staying committed to one another. Before we move into the preparing to launch, Lynn, are there any other final tips or things you'd like to share around the regional sector support team to recap from last week and help move us into the launch?
Just again, that regional support team can really build trust among the public partners, and you can really become more efficient at getting things accomplished for your sector partnership. So I think they're in their consistency. So even as roles change and people come in and out, it gives those public partners a chance to sort of train each other on what sector partnerships are about. As you know, through the 6 years that we've had ours, I've seen people come and go, and so they need a little bit of training around sector partnerships, and that's a great way to do that as well. So yeah, it's just a really good support system.
Great, thanks, Lynn. How about from those of you participants on the webinar here, as you think about building that support system, that regional sector support team, are there questions that stand out that we can answer now or also circle back to throughout the webinar series?
Well, I think you probably talked about it prior, but we've got businesses so engaged in so many ways with community colleges, either through the work-based learning and various work things we're doing there with our advisory boards. I mean, how do we do all this without becoming a burden on them and simplifying, kind of a one-stop shop rather than, all these efforts, dealing with a lot of the same businesses.
That's a really great question, Robert. And Lynn, it reminds me of last week, we asked Paul, what's the value been to you? So Paul Harder, the CEO of Aqua Hot Heating Systems in Northern Colorado and a business champion that Lynn works with on their NOCO manufacturing. And we asked him directly what the value to him has been of this regional sector support team. And Robert, his answer was that it's less emails that I have to read. And essentially those emails are a proxy for his time and his ability to engage in a really coordinated and effective way with not just the community college, but other partners from workforce development and economic development and other community-based organizations across the region. And so how to do that and how you respond in a coordinated way, we did cover a bit of that last week. Lynn, are there top tips that you would share? And then also we can be sure to get you all some additional resources on building out that regional support team.
Well, a good example would be the internship program that our workforce center is focused on right now to build up their work-based learning. They came, rather than going out and pounding the streets and knocking on every manufacturer's door and every healthcare facility, I encouraged them to come to the sector partnership and the talent committee, or the workforce committee as it is with the healthcare group, and talk about this opportunity. And so when they did, then the sector partnership took that on and started looking for employers that wanted to take on an apprentice or an intern. So, those committees really took that on as their project, and also came up with some funding to help employers. So they offset some of the funding and helped to pay some of that salary. So it became a sector partnership project rather than workforce trying to find employers who would be happy to take on an intern.
That's a great concrete example, Lynn, for how these partnerships really become that go-to spot when there is an initiative or an effort or a program that you need from the community, where you need input from businesses, from the community college or workforce center, economic development. The sector partnerships become that go-to spot to really work with businesses from that industry.
Like Paul said, otherwise he'd be getting 15 emails from all of us. So from the community college, trying to get him on an advisory team, from the workforce center, trying to get him to take an intern, from, there'd be a whole list, because we knew he was a good guy and he'd probably come through. But this way it's more coordinated through the partnership, and he can step forward for the ones that he wants to take part in.
So with that, I'm going to transition us to preparing to launch. And a big part of preparing to launch is really beginning to identify and cultivate and harness the collective interest of key business leaders like a Paul Harder that we spoke with last week. So last week we talked about in preparing to launch, it's all about cultivating a few key business champions, and those business champions are the ones that are actually distributing the invitation letters to other business champions. They're the ones that are sending notices out and on behalf of the partnership as a whole. And so in order to do that, it's also, as you're preparing to launch, or even if you've launched and you're looking to build out business participation, it requires you to really build a list of decision makers and CEOs from across the region that can get involved in this partnership, either to launch or to do a refresh. And so that preparing to launch, as Lynn hinted at, for later in the partnership, it takes a lot of one-on-one attention and building and cultivating relationships. And preparing to launch, that also stands, and that is also really important. Because then that moves you to a launch that's really positioned to be the spot where business leaders are able to step up and identify the opportunities and their priorities for joint action, and where they're committing to taking that joint action. And so I'd like to just dig into the refresh meeting or the launch meeting a bit more. And there's some really core principles here that are important to other stages of partnership development as well, and that are important to come back to throughout the life cycle of a partnership. So as you're going through those ebbs and flows, these foundations are important to come back to. And so before the meeting starts, and before the actual launch meeting, you want to be sure that business champions are prepared to welcome everyone and also really actively participate in the meeting. So you want them to have a set of expectations for really leading this meeting, essentially. And so to do that, it requires you to have prep calls with business champions. So as Lynn said earlier, making that one-on-one request. And so what this often looks like is picking up the phone or sending a calendar invite and scheduling that prep call with business champions, or a group of business champions together. I do find that getting, if you have 3 businesses that are willing and eager to step up and really help lead a partnership, getting them on the phone together works really well too. And so you want those business leaders to really be prepared to identify the common issues that they have and that they're eager to tackle as a partnership. And so when you're prepping business champions for this type of meeting and this next gen partnership where you have a coordinated regional sector support team and you're really working to shift it to be an industry driven partnership where employers are eagerly stepping up and helping lead action forward. Some important talking points, really practical here. Some important talking points to help business champions step up and take on that ownership role are to prepare business champions that you want them to talk about opportunities or issues that matter most to them and to their company. And so you want them before that refresh or launch meeting to really be thinking about opportunities that would most benefit them, and also most benefit them that they would most benefit from partnering with other companies from that industry around. And so in something like healthcare, that might be things around particular CNA shortages, around integrated care. So these are not, remember, these are not just workforce topics, but healthcare partnerships, for instance, I've seen many of them gain a lot of traction around opportunities to discuss and use sector partnerships as a form for integrating care across the hospital or across the healthcare systems. So so hospitals partnering with long-term care facilities and other rehab facilities. You want them to be positioned to talk about what those opportunities are they want to tackle. What you do not want to do here is to seed things for them. So you do not want them to focus really specifically on workforce issues. You want them to think broadly about issues that they would benefit from tackling with other peers from across the industry. Next, you want business champions to be prepared and to understand and have the expectation that this is a shared forum for them to address the most pressing issues as an industry. So it's about them as an industry having a collective voice, but it's also about you all as public partners, as a regional support team, creating that shared table to work with the business leaders. And then finally, another key for business champions to emphasize is that this is all about action, and previewing at the beginning of the launch or refresh meeting that at the end you will be making a call for commitments, and the agenda includes a really specific request for business leaders to step up and help move things forward. So just making it clear that it requires a commitment from them. So I wanted to just provide some of those specific talking points that that could be helpful as you're looking to hold a launch meeting or a refresh meeting. Lynn, are there other talking points or points that you would emphasize or things that stand out from this as you dig into launch meetings or a refresh meeting?
I think, again, getting at what those most important passions are about, and then focusing on what are the things you can do in the next 60 days, some short-term actions around each of those topics. So before you leave that meeting, you want to be sure you have folks that have signed up for each of those actions, so you can go back to them and they can report back at the next meeting we'll have.
Great, thanks, Lynn. So what we're talking about here is that, and just to put a cap on this, is that it takes one-on-one prep with business champions to get them in the space where they're really going to feel empowered to step up and commit to helping chair a particular committee or to take a particular action. There are also several other prep items that can help lay the groundwork for business leaders being ready to step up and commit in that way. And so you also, as we have said, the regional sector support team has to be fully committed to this approach. And then just really practically in the room that morning before a launch meeting, you want the room to be set up in a U shape. And so this U shape matters, and I'll show a picture here in a second. You also want to tend to other details like name tags, having table tents, so that business leaders can see across the room who their peers are sitting across from them and what business they're from, an agenda printed and refreshments. You also, there are a set of materials that are important to have at a launch meeting or a refresh meeting that relate to the overall flow of the agenda. And so you want all businesses to have one large felt pen, as well as three different colors of 5x8 index cards. And so you want three different sets and all of the sets to be a different color. We also, as Joe noted last week, having a blue sticky wall or large sticky notes also work well. So 5x8 or bigger sticky notes can work. You also want the regional support team to be prepared to greet business leaders and participants help them identify where to sit. And so that attention to detail, I wanted to show that just to show that type of attention to detail and also just the room set up make a big difference in businesses getting the message that, oh yeah, we need to step up and help lead this forward. And also for you all as partners and as regional supports teams, to really make the space for business leaders to identify those priorities and move it forward.
Emily, I have a quick hint too with the table tents. We have used those in the past, and I would for sure keep them at the front of the room so that they pick them up when they come in and set them at their place. I think all of you have this experience that a few of the folks who say they're going to come don't come, and then if you put it out ahead of time, then you have table tents at blank spaces, and that doesn't send a good message. So we made that mistake a couple of times. So just a hint to have individuals pick them up when they walk in and bring them in and set them down in front of them.
Thank you, Lynn. Nothing more awkward than calling out all the people that haven't been able to make it last minute.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. So the room setup, I wanted to show this slide just so that you could get a real sense of what this looks like and what the room looks like. And so on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the U setup and the partners or the non-employer participants kind of lined around the back. You also want to have a sticky wall or just blank wall space that Post-it notes will stick to. And so in the picture on the left-hand side, you can see that U shape of business leaders, and you can see the partners that are around the back. They're hard to spot back there behind the tree, but you can see that. This is taken at the launch of the Central Nebraska Manufacturing Partnership, and that's Brian Deacon from BD Manufacturing up there in the front, welcoming everyone and introducing them. This picture, I will say, you do not need AV for a launch meeting. This room was just such that they had TV screens that we weren't able to move around, so we had to get that blue screen in the wall space below. But you can see that finding a room that has that clear wall space for a sticky wall is really important. And even in the launch of the Central Nebraska Partnership, it would have been more ideal to not have that screen there, the TV screen there, and to have the blue wall up a bit more. But it worked, and we were able to make that work well. So sometimes you just have to get creative. But paying attention up front to those details is really important. Because it really helps set the tone among the business leaders that this partnership is about them, and that you're all there to help support them and make the space for them, and that you together as a community and as partners can really work together to tackle these big challenges that you're facing across your region. So the sample agenda, here's a sample agenda for a launch meeting, and you can find more on the link, or a more detailed agenda on the link. But I just really wanted to emphasize that launch meetings or refresh meetings, if you're refreshing priorities, require a 2-hour chunk of time to really get into first identifying and defining the unique opportunities for the region. And then moving into prioritizing areas for shared action. The bulk of the conversation will be around those areas for shared action, and then ending with commitments. So this blue wall, this is progress throughout a meeting, and this is actually a sample simulation meeting. But you can see that blue wall becomes filled with sticky notes. Or the different colored index cards. And I'm going to just walk through now what those different index cards are. So on the left-hand side, you have opportunities. And so you'll start off with a blank blue wall, And when you first ask the question around identifying unique opportunities, the intent here of this part of the agenda is really to begin to get the juices flowing among the business leaders that this is to think in a visionary way about what's needed to really propel their industry forward. What is needed to ensure that the industry is thriving, to ensure that the healthcare industry is able to provide the best care possible across the region. And so some simple questions to ask in that the first big half an hour chunk of the agenda really focus on what are the biggest opportunities to grow the industry in the region, and what could really drive growth over the next few years. And so this is where you begin to get things like there are big opportunities coming with the changes and structures around the healthcare industry. They're really unique opportunities for us as a region because of where we're geographically located in the center of the country. What you're looking for here are essentially exciting trends that are on the horizon. So this is often where business leaders also talk about things like technology and advancements in technology that if any one business or the industry as a whole could really capitalize on, it will really enable them to not only grow and to be a really stable but also cornerstone force within a regional economy, but also will contribute to the industry and the community as a whole. And so as you're identifying these unique opportunities, you want to ask the question around identifying unique opportunities and actually first have the business leaders write down one opportunity on a 5x8 card. And so they can write down up to 2 opportunities on a 5x8 card, and then you'll collect them or the facilitator will collect them and organize them on the blue wall. And so this left side, I think you can see my cursor moving around, are a variety of opportunities, and then whoever's facilitating the meeting will walk around and collect those 5x8 cards from the business leaders and organize them, group them together by like thoughts and like strands of opportunities or exciting trends, and place them on the blue sticky wall. From there, then the facilitator and the rest of that half an hour really will dig into and ask the business leaders to expand on their thoughts that they wrote on that blue card. So if one wrote, there's a really exciting opportunity in our region around automation and in the industry as a whole. And so then the facilitator can then really ask some clarifying question of the business leaders to get the conversation going around those opportunities. From there,
can I just add something to that real quick? You know, and I know Emily said these details are important. So this has been tested, and this works really well. And it might seem kind of silly or a little bit of an overkill if you have these notes and these stickies and you're doing this thing. But I'm telling you that there's something that clicks in the mind of that employer, that I am putting my thought into writing, and then I'm physically handing it to you, and you're putting it on the board, and it's much more than just asking them and then writing it for them, or it's just their own words, and it's just that visualization, that physicality. It's such a stronger link for them, and it means more. And I know, like Emily said, you're setting the table that this is action oriented. So you're not coming and just sitting there and hoping nobody calls on you. You're going to be asked to write your thoughts on these documents and then put them up and then expand on them, or nominate or join the subcommittee that's related to it. And if that's not your thing, then that's fine. But we are setting the tone that you are going to be asked to do things to get to our goals and to actually make something happen with this meeting. So that I know, like what Paul said in the last session, or the last webinar, that in 10 years they're not at the same meeting saying, we talked about this 10 years ago and we never did anything with it. You're setting the tone that we are actually going to do something. This is a different initiative than what you've experienced in the past.
And I'll echo that, Joe. I agree. I think having the physicality of those cards up on the board, the other thing it does is it's very clear then where the priorities are. If you have, 15 cards around talent and you only have one around, some other initiative, it's easy for people to see very clearly, very quickly where the priorities are going to be for this group.
Thank you both. And I'll add there the other piece that's really critical from a facilitation perspective in using those cards is that it provides an opportunity for all the business leaders to really have a voice and to write things down up front. And so it provides an opportunity to see in the opportunity section, for instance, where those opportunities are landing. And so in the example, you'll see here around new technology, for instance, this example could be around automation, around new processes that are being implemented. And so there's a cluster of ideas that all group together well underneath new technology. And then you're able to use that as a starting place for businesses really sharing and conversing. I will say in launch meetings or refresh meetings like this, the conversation is about 90% business leaders or maybe even 95% business leaders and 5 to 10% the facilitator. I'd say actually probably more like 5% the facilitator. So it's really about asking the question and then letting the business leaders and helping the business leaders group the questions by small prompts and moving them forward. But it's really about the business leaders identifying what their common opportunities are and then moving into action. And so what that first opportunity question does is really demonstrates and gets them in the frame of thinking of there are big opportunities for our region and there are exciting things that we can accomplish. And what is needed what do you need to accomplish those big opportunities? And so the second big chunk of the agenda is really around identifying those areas for shared action. So the question to ask here is what's required to capitalize on these opportunities of new technology around new and emerging markets? And what are the top areas? Another way of asking that are the top areas for action that are needed to really unlock the potential growth of the industry in your region. And so you really want to move from opportunity into action. And so you'll notice that in the way that these questions are phrased, they're also not questions about pain points or what's keeping you up at night. Although they get to those a bit, it's about staying focused on the potential and opportunity for the industry in the region. And so in this section, the areas for shared action, you want to again just quickly discuss and talk through what some potential actions are, and then have each business leader again write down their top 2 areas for action, one idea per card. This is often a great time for the facilitator to say something like, I might have my back to you for a minute, and this is a great opportunity for you as business leaders to talk with one another and share with one another. And so as those cards are being organized across the room, the business leaders that are sitting next to one another are also beginning to build those informal relationships with one another and just have some side conversations, which is all really good as you're building the momentum of a group and working towards them gelling together as a group. And so around areas for shared action, some of the actions that might be identified there, are things around developing a skilled and talented workforce, often things around increasing awareness about a particular industry, increasing the availability of curriculum, really aligning the training that's being provided with what's needed. I will say it's often in this action section that it can be really hard for you all, or for those that are on the line that are from a community college or from education, workforce development, economic development, to be quiet, because business leaders are often saying things that you're already working on. So for instance, I've heard we really need to have more candidates walking in the door with some hands-on experience and some more opportunities for work-based learning. And you're sitting, if you're a community college, you're sitting in the back of the room going, I'm doing that already. But again, this meeting and this is all about making the space for business leaders to identify that that's something they need, so that they have greater ownership over this issue and will step up and help lead that issue forward. What happens if and when, as a education provider, for instance, or a workforce board says, well, we've got that work-based learning program, the business leader either steps away and walks out of that meeting thinking, well, that workforce board, that community college, that partner is on it, so I don't need to do anything. I'm going to step back because they've got it. It also can make them feel like, oh, well, I didn't know that was going on. I'm out of the loop, so I'm just not going to say more here. And so that's why it's so important to just make the space for the business leaders to articulate those needs and identify them. And the other thing I'll hit on here quickly around these actions is this is where actions that are not just workforce related really come to the fore. And so this is where business leaders say, we need a consistent forum for just networking with one another and getting together. That our roads are, I'm having a big trouble with our roadways and our infrastructure that we have here. We really need to improve infrastructure, because otherwise I can't get our product out to market. And so these are real examples of the types of action teams that are built after these initial launch meetings. Lynn, I would love to hear what stands out to you from this process in identifying actions, and also Joe, if there are any comments you have here or things you'd like to highlight.
I would just say we had several of our public partners pushing back about not sitting in the inner circle. And Paul put it really, really well last week. It isn't about not hearing from the public partners. It's if we don't put those industry leaders at the forefront, they won't do the talking. And so they're the gold. They're the ones that we want to hear from. We want to find out what we need to be working on there. And so it's important that the public partners, and it just sends a very strong message that those industry leaders are the ones at the forefront, and they're the ones we need to hear from. So again, we had some kind of angry folks at the very beginning with the public group who sat in the back and listened, but when we just went back to listen only, and they learned what they learned from this process, it was so helpful, and they really understood at the end.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that I've run into and I've noticed is, you know, when you give employers I guess the table to talk and to kind of air some of their grievances, you're going to hear some stuff you don't want to hear, unfortunately. So they'll complain about their educators, they'll complain about their support partners, they'll bring up stuff that you're already doing that they're not aware of, and you might get frustrated, but you need to bite your tongue and just let them kind of vent, and don't, you know, just stand up right away and say, I can fix that, or I told you about that, you forgot about it, or it's been on our website for 5 years, or, you know, you got to wait and kind of hold that and just try to understand that you know, they just don't know, or, you know, they're very busy people. So trying to be empathetic about what's going on and just kind of just let it roll, let it go, and just listen and kind of, you know, go forward, one foot in front of the other. So don't take it personally, but you're going to hear stuff that you probably don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, that is spot on. So thank you for that important, you will hear things that you don't want to hear or that are frustrating to hear. But what that pivots to, and when you're really creating that space, is an opportunity for them to step up and help champion this and move it forward, and for them to see themselves as an important part of the solution, and a key partner in that solution. And so that's why then the last big chunk of the agenda is really around, and this is a quick, about 10 minutes, a quick call for champions. And so you want to wrap up the meeting reminding the business leaders that this partnership is all about action, and is all about them as business champions really driving the action forward. And so you'll ask them to write their name and action area that they're interested in championing on a card, and get up and stick that on the blue wall. And so that's a very physical way for those business champions to volunteer, and to also just begin to see themselves as a key part of tackling these action areas that they have identified. So from there, after the launch, you need to quickly move into organizing to action. And so this is the fourth step. And so what happens here is you form action teams around those priority areas that were identified at the launch. You recruit business chairs and co-chairs for each of those teams. And so this is where Lynn's tip around the one-on-one interaction is really important. And so this means that oftentimes the regional support team needs to identify those business chairs that really stood out as being enthusiastic about a particular issue, or the champions that signed up for a particular issue, and reaching out to them and asking them if they would be willing to help really move the action team forward in the near term at least. And then the moving to action also means bringing in very slowly and at the appropriate time the right support partners. And so you do still, as you're moving these action teams forward, you still want your first movement to action to really be holding initial action team face-to-face meetings or phone calls, where the volunteers, those business leaders that stuck their name on the board for a priority area, are hopping on the phone together or sitting down in person to really describe and to flesh out further what success looks like, but then also what early wins they can begin achieving and what they can do in the next 30, 60, 90 days to make some headway towards that bigger vision. And so you don't want to get into the pitfall of getting the action plan exactly perfect. You want to really quickly move into the immediate actions that are needed. And so what that looks like is immediately after the launch. So within 1 week of the launch, distributing that summary, and summary of what happened at the launch. You also want to get those action team calls or those meetings scheduled within 2 weeks of the launch, based on the schedules of those key champions. So I do find that this immediately after the launch, there's a feeling of, whew, we had that great launch meeting, and now as the regional support team, businesses will just organically step up and move things forward. But this is where your roles are really critical, and helping to be responsive and get communications out in a really timely way, and making sure that the next steps are scheduled. So within 30 days then, you want to hold those action team calls, focused on defining success, identifying early wins and commitments. And then within 60 to 90 days, you want to reconvene as a full partnership. And you want to reconvene at a time and date that the business leaders at that initial launch or refresh meeting have identified. And so I do find that the cadence that tends to work well for full partnership meetings is quarterly, but always want the business's input on that right cadence. you definitely don't want too much grass to grow in between meetings and communications. That's a big pitfall that I find commonly across partnerships that I work with across the country.
Emily, one of the things that was very helpful with us is we assigned a public partner for each one of the action teams.
Great tip. Thank you, Lynn. I would love to just pause here and see what quick questions we have about the actual flow of the launch and what needs to happen immediately following the launch. And we can either begin to tackle some of these questions now, and we can also, depending on what they are, I'll make a list of them and we'll kick off the next call with them as well. So what stands out about the launch or immediately following the launch that you'd like to dig into more, or that you wonder about?
I had a couple questions I wrote down. So we kind of have some priorities built, and we're working on action items, or trying to work on some big things for this fall. So I'm sitting here wondering, do I refresh and relaunch, or try to piece together what we have and move forward, and then maybe do in the future a refresh and relaunch when we're maybe ready for another set of action items? How best to proceed when you're mid-process?
Mid-process and you have priority areas identified. So the two questions that I would ask to help, there's definitely not a one size fits all answer to your question, Christy. But the two questions that I would ask broadly are, number one, how are those priorities that you identified to begin with? How have you gotten to the place where those are the priorities you're working towards for the fall? And then number two, how much ownership and leadership are you seeing from the business leaders around those priorities? Are they things that those business leaders are really stepping up and helping to own and move forward? Are they things that those business leaders have tabs on? Are they expecting this to happen? So those are a few of the initial questions I would have to help really piece out what might make the most sense. I will say and Lynn, I'd be curious about your experiences here, but if you're moving forward and pushing priority areas forward, that business leaders that seem to be really pushing a boulder up a hill, and it just is not happening and not coming together, and the businesses aren't helping step up and lead it, other partners aren't. It could be a good time to reframe it as a launch, but if you do have some momentum, even a little bit of momentum, I think you can apply some of the principles that we've talked about towards accomplishing those priorities, and then look at doing a refresh or relaunch at a future date. I also, the one last tip I would give there is if you do have a business champion or a few key business champions, I would ask their opinion before doing anything.
Okay. If I can ask my other questions, I don't want to take the time for everybody. So how often do you do the blue wall or review priorities?
Lynn, I will have you share your experiences there as a way to lend some insight here.
Sure. So one of the things we do with our healthcare workforce subcommittee is we have a strategic planning session every year where we revisit the goals that we're working on, set new goals, and set new action plans for every single year for that subcommittee. And that helps keep everything fresh and keeps us working forward. There are some things that carry over, and then there's some new things, because people come and go and they have different priorities. So that's a way that we kind of go through that same process with the Blue Wall. It's a little bit different, but it's still just revisiting our action plans and our priorities and making sure we're on track. So we kind of do that once a year. But I would go along with what Emily says, kind of if you get to a sticking point and you seem like you're not getting any further, either, and I think, Emily, you said this before, either the action plan that you're working on isn't what they want to work on, or you don't have the right business leaders at the table. And so you want to kind of go back to that and explore those two things. I would caution against a relaunch too often, for sure, because it kind of depends, like Emily said, on how you came to those first initiatives. But if they were well thought out and they were business initiatives, yeah, just checking with your business leaders to make sure you're still on track, but still following up is important.
Okay. Okay. Okay, that's good. Next question, my last one. I was sitting here listening to how you were talking about the role of the support partners, and I was trying to put myself in their shoes, sitting in the back of the room. The question that came to my mind is, what if what I do as a support resource isn't one of the things that comes up on the top of the list, and therefore it appears like my services aren't going to be requested? Then as a support partner, you know, a lot of these work off of grants and they got metrics they got to meet and different things. So as a support partner, now what do I do? Because I am not being asked to help with this, so I don't want to go push my programs on them. So how would you suggest they interact or behave in that manner?
So my thought around that is, if they're wise, they know that this industry group is a really important part of what they do, even if it doesn't exactly fit with one action item that they're involved with right now. So staying connected to that industry group, I think, will be important for them in the future. So staying connected to the region support group and then attending those quarterly meetings and watching for that opportunity when it comes up.
Okay.
And I'll wrap that up with, it requires regional partners and businesses to really approach things in a very different way than they're used to doing business, Christy, as you really hit on with they might be irrelevant if they don't have a grant around this. And so it is important up front and throughout to remind partners that this is a different way of business, but also showing really practically how it can benefit them over time, and that connection to industry and business is so important. So I just took note of this as well, and I think this question is a really key one and an important one, and really hits to the relevancy of partners. So I will make sure that we hit on this again when we come back together. I'm just looking at the time here, and we're already just over, unfortunately.
Thank you.
But I'd love others. I want to hear other questions from folks. So these questions are great, and it's so helpful to know how you all are taking in this information and thinking about it. So thanks for the active conversation today, and continue to put questions in here. And Lynn and I will be back next week, and I want to just preview here not to miss the final webinar series, the webinar in the series on August 14th, because we will have Yvonne Myers from Columbine Health Systems with us for that final webinar. Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you for final words, and maybe we can kick off next week with some of the announcements that you had, if that won't be too late.
Yeah, that's fine. And you know, send me any of those questions that you might have. I know next week is a topic that a lot of you are interested in talking about performance. So kind of how do we measure success? What are some goals we can have? So I know that's a big one. So you're going to want to join for that session. A couple quick reminders for next steps. I know I talked about the Future Ready Iowa Employer Summits. I'm glad that Rob Denson from DMAC brought up some of the scholarships and funding. The deadlines are fast approaching for some of those, so I would go to futurereadyiowa.gov just to learn a little bit more about them. But they were able to secure quite a bit of money to try to get more people either back to school or to support employers who are doing interesting things to get more of their current workforce trained and upskilled to meet some of those goals for the initiative. I also, just real quick, I wanted to show a really cool announcement. Today is rolling out a healthcare or health science work-based learning toolkit that you'll see on our website to try to help healthcare providers around the state set up and better understand how to better engage with youth, high school being the target audience. But that is rolling out today if you want to learn more. And as always, reach out to me if you want to talk further about some of the, what's been discussed on these webinars. If you have questions, if you want to talk more about things that maybe we're not covering, I'm always open to traveling and doing face-to-face meetings and consultations as well. So thank you, everyone. I know we're over time here, so looking forward to continuing the conversation and making some strides for the expansion and the success for sector partnerships within the state of Iowa.